يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة وآتيناه الحكم صبيا إذ قال الله يا عيسى إني متوفيك ورافعك إلي محمد رسول الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Continuing with Surah Al-Kahf, the surah that talks about stories that are examples for every single believer, how to face the different trials and tribulations of this life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. He brings these examples for people to see. They are the best examples. Best examples, why? Because anyone can relate to it till the Day of Judgment, not just confined to the time where these stories occurred, but rather for each and everyone to take the example of what to follow, the example of good and the example of evil, what to avoid and what to seek, and what to be upon, and when to be patient, and what to strive for. Every single aspect of goodness is mentioned, and all means of goodness are there, and the same thing to avoid what is evil. We talked about the story of the people of the cave, and inshallah ta'ala we'll mention next the story of the person that had the two gardens, and also that's an example of the trial, the test of wealth and power, and how is that related to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to make himself patient, to have the company of those who are righteous, and not to be distracted or go beyond them, seeking the adornment of this life. So we'll start inshallah ta'ala where we stopped last time, where with verse number 29 from Surah Al-Kahf. Verse number 29 in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقل الحق من ربكم فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر إنا أعتدنا للظالمين نارا أحاط بهم سرادقها وإن يستغيثوا يغاثوا بماء كالمهل يشوي الوجوه بئس الشراب وساءت مرتفقا. Which means, and say, the truth is from your Lord. So whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. Indeed, we have prepared for the wrongdoers a fire whose walls will surround them. And if they call for relief, they will be relieved with water like murky oil, which scalds their faces. Wretched is the drink, and evil is the resting place. وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Al-Haqqu min Rabbikum, the truth is from your Lord. The truth is from your Lord. The words that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam was commanded to convey, the entire Qur'an, and then these verses that starts with Qul, say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, comes after Qul, a direct statement, not ambiguous, that shows the truth, explains the truth. So here, Al-Haqqu min Rabbikum, the truth is from your Lord. This is the truth. The truth is only from your Lord. Other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the matter can be a debatable issue, right? If a human being says something, that's a human being. If it comes from his own thinking and his own intellect and reason, then that can be challenged by another intellect and reason. A group of human beings versus another group of human beings, cults, made up, man-made religions, all kinds of things like this. Can be something that is, their own thinking, their own reason, but it's not the truth. The truth is from your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that brings it all together, that when it comes to matters of belief, when it comes to religion, when it comes to what's right and what is wrong, it is not left to the human beings. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave humanity to be astray like this, for them to decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed books, send messengers for people to get to know what is right and what is wrong. Stealing is wrong, right? If someone all of a sudden they want to change this, right? It's, people can say whatever they want, but the truth is that this is wrong. Things of that nature, matters of belief, the ultimate truth. وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. When it comes to matters of belief, the truth is from you, Lord. Therefore, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever he wills, let him disbelieve. Why? Because there is لا إكراه في الدين. There's no coercion in the religion. You cannot force anyone to believe, right? And the foolish ones among the disbelievers, those who think that they can force someone to disbelieve, they can't, because the original place of it is in the heart. So you cannot force anyone to believe or to disbelieve. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. The religion of Islam and calling to the deen of Islam is not to force people to be believers or to be disbelievers, to present to them the truth. They accept the truth and this is good for them. If they reject the truth, then the punishment, which is the warning for them, is in the hereafter, but not to force anyone to do anything. And that in itself has a warning, but again it's with regards to matters of the hereafter. And it shows also there's no compulsion in the religion. No one is to be forced whatsoever to embrace the religion, even though the religion is the truth. When something is the truth and it's the ultimate truth, you wish that people have to adopt it because that's the truth. You want your son to see the truth, right? When you see your son is deceived and blinded away from the truth, you want to, as if you would love to force him to have it, to force him to be upon it, and eventually he will see it, right? This is how the sincerity of the believers. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding them, this is not in your authority whatsoever. La ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in the religion. You present the truth, right? And guidance is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. This is not to approve from Allah that if a person is a disbeliever, this is a good thing. No, but it shows that this is a matter of a test of this life. إِنَّا أَعْتَدْنَا. The evidence of that, what the verse ended with, إِنَّا أَعْتَدْنَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ نَارًا. Indeed, we prepared for the wrongdoers, those who disbelieved, a fire, نَارًا أَحَاطَ بِهِمْ سُرَادِقُهَا, whose walls will surround them. A suradiq is the walls of a place or walls of something. So here the fire will surround them with walls. That means they cannot escape from it. عَلَيْهِمْ نَارٌ مُؤْصَدَةٌ. It will be locked. They will be locked in it, and they will burn in it forever. And they are the ones that disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَحَاطَ بِهِمْ. أَحَاطَ بِهِمْ, surrounded and encompassed them from all directions. سُرَادِقُهَا, its walls. وَإِن يَسْتَغِيثُوا يُغَاثُوا بِمَاءٍ كَالْمُهْلِ يَشْوِي الْوُجُوهِ. And if they are seeking refuge and they're calling for relief, people, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all from the hellfire. It's a serious matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the hellfire, created the Jannah, and He revealed the books and sent messengers warning people from the hellfire, calling people to the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and giving descriptions of the hellfire. So the people, when they're thrown into the hellfire, they're being burned in the hellfire, and they're surrounded by the walls of the hellfire. They cannot escape, so they scream and they seek help. وَيَسْتَغِيثُوا. And if they seek help, they seek relief, screaming and shouting. يُغَاثُوا. When they're given then the relief and the help, بِمَاءٍ كَالْمُهْلِ يَشْوِي الْوُجُوهِ, with water like al-muhl. And al-muhl is the murky oil. That means this is in itself is boiling. يَشْوِي الْوُجُوهِ. That means it burns the faces. That means it scalds the faces completely. So whether this is a murky oil or something that is molten, as they say, أَرُصَاصٍ مُذَابٍ, lead, molten lead, something that to increase their punishment. So the thing that they sought or they thought it's a relief in itself is a severe punishment for them. So that's why لهم ظلل من النار من فوقهم ظلل ومن تحتهم ظلل. They have shades on top of them, shades from underneath them. They're surrounded with the hellfire, their garments from the hellfire. Everything is punishment all over the place. And this is as a just punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unto them. So as you see here, the punishment when it mentions them seeking relief. وَيَسْتَغِيثُ يُغَاثُ. They will be given a relief. But with what? بِمَاءٍ كَالْمُهْلِ يَشْوِي الْوُجُوهِ. Al-muhl is whether it's the murky oil or the molten lead that will cause the faces to be scalded, to be burned, even before it gets to them. بئس الشراب وساءت مرتفقة. What a worst and wretched is this drink. And of course the drink burns them before it gets into their mouth, before it gets to their inside. So you can imagine what's going to happen to them in the inside. وساءت مرتفقة. المرتفقة, what a worst مرتفق. مرتفق, as you see, resting place. المرتفق comes from الارتفاق, something that is gentle, something for a person to rest. You know, when you find finally a place to rest, this is your comfort place, your comfort zone. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَسَاءَتْ مُرْتَفَقًا. This is, wretched is the worst place for them to rest. That means there's no rest for them. They're in constant punishment after punishment forever as a result of their disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as mentioned before, of how, what made them reach that state is the disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the arrogance that turned them away from the truth when the truth was presented to them. And it shows also how the importance of to be patient with those who invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the ibadah. And after mentioning this severe punishment that brings the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says then in the next verse, verse number 30, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ إِنَّا لَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ مَنْ أَحْسَنَ عَمَلًا. Indeed, those who have believed and done righteous deeds, indeed we will not allow to be lost the reward of any who did well in deeds. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those who believed and did righteous good deeds. Always mentioned in the Qur'an this combination between al-iman, faith, and righteous good deeds. And al-iman itself increases and decreases, increases with the good deeds and decreases with the bad deeds. And al-iman in the context of the good deeds with it in the same sentence, that means the belief in the heart and then the actions of righteousness. And all of that is from the revelation from Allah. And if you remember the verses before, أُتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. Recite to follow what have been inspired and revealed to you from your Lord. And what has been revealed to the Prophet ﷺ is basically the matters of faith and the righteous good deeds. So those who received the wahi, the revelation from Allah, they followed it. And as a result of that, they were believers and they did the righteous good deeds. إِنَّ لَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ مَنْ أَحْسَنَ عَمَلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving them this beautiful promise that their actions, their amal, their good deeds is not going to be rendered in vain. It's not going to be lost. You might forget what you did yesterday or the year before or 10 years ago, but it's all recorded, it's all saved, and the rewards of it is saved as long as it's sincere, done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, following the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And then when it says inna la nudi'a, daya is when something is lost. Ajra, the reward, man, the one that ahsana amala, the one that did righteous good deeds. Ihsanul amal is to do the deeds in the proper way, in the good way, right? And the good way again is to be sincere and to follow the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And the opposite of that is what previously mentioned in the previous verse. Those who asa'ul amal, those who did evil in actions when they disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when their affairs were just loose in neglect, forgetfulness, following their desires. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing the rewards of the believers, that their rewards is not going to be lost. It's all recorded for them. They will get the full reward, not just one by one, one hasana by one hasana, but the minimum is one hasana multiplied by 10 times to many different multifolds, as by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with the next verse, which shows the rewards and more after the break, so stay with us inshallah.
محمد رسول الله محمد رسول الله.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome back, and with verses in Surah Al-Kahf that shows the rewards of the believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them among them and keep us steadfast upon al-iman, faith and righteous good deeds, and make us among the people of Jannah versus the punishment of the people of the hellfire. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from that. So after mentioning the believers, those who believed and did righteous good deeds, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not render in vain their actions, then the next verse, verse number 31, talks about their rewards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتُ عَدْنٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهِمُ الْأَنْهَارُ يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس واستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك نعم الثواب وحسنت مرتفقة, which means those who will have gardens of perpetual residence. Beneath them rivers will flow. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and will wear green garments of fine silk and brocade, reclining therein on adorned couches. Excellent is the reward and good is the resting place. So here is the reward, some of the reward, and the Qur'an is full of verses that talks about the rewards of the believers in the hereafter. Ulaik, and ulaik gives the meaning of those who are of a higher level. They are the ones, lahum jannatu adnin, for them is jannat, gardens of Adn, Eden. And the meaning of Adn, that means they are staying in it forever. They won't leave it whatsoever. It's an everlasting delight and rewards for them. This is for the believers, and this is the meaning of Adn. So أولئك لهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار. Underneath them the rivers, they flow with ease. And the meaning of from underneath, it's not like it's underground, but this is how the rivers are. It's not on top of one's head that it causes for the person to drown, but this is the ease of it. يحلون فيها, they will be given in the Jannah, adorned. Now يحلون, as you see the verses talked about this worldly life is a zina, is an adornment. That many people, they only see the adornment of this life and they don't deal with this life in its real way and form. That's why they can be deceived. The real zina is in the hereafter. The believers will be adorned in it, min asawira min dhahab, with bracelets of gold. وَيَلْبَسُونَ ثِيَابًا خُضْرًا. Gold was forbidden for men in this life, so they get the rewards of wearing it in the Jannah, in the hereafter. وَيَلْبَسُونَ ثِيَابًا خُضْرًا. And they wear garments of green garments of fine silk, min sundus. Sundus wa istabraq. Sundus, the fine silk. And the silk is something that also beyond what we know of silk. You know, this is whatever we have in this life is also something that is amazing. And you see how soft it is. And it's different kinds and different levels of it. But in Jannah, even though the name is the same, but ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. No eyes have seen, no ears have heard, no hearts have imagined. Istabraq is the same material but of a different level. Thickness, much thicker than the fine ones. So fine ones, thick ones of silk that beyond one's understanding and comprehension. All of that is a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the believers. مُتَّكِئِينَ فِيهَا عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ. They're reclining in Jannah on the recliners, which is the way of the kings and those who are rich when they sit and they recline. And of course for the people of Jannah, it's an everlasting joy. No worries anymore, no fear of death, of sickness, of pain, or for depression, anything whatsoever. There's the slightest misery is removed from them. They are in just na'im and delight after na'im after delight in a perpetual way, as an everlasting way, without any limits whatsoever, and whatever they wish for comes to them beyond one's imagination. So this is just some of the characteristics or describing some of the delight of people of Jannah that we can relate to in this worldly life. But it's beyond what we hear. It's not just limited to what we see in this life. نِعْمَ الثَّوَابُ وَحَسُنَتْ مُرْتَفَقًا. Compare this to what's the verse that talked about the disbelievers. Here, نِعْمَ الثَّوَابُ. What a beautiful, excellent is the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compared to what it says, بِئْسَ الشَّرَابُ, as for the wrongdoers. Wretched is their drink. Here for the believers, it says نِعْمَ الثَّوَابُ. Ni'mah is the opposite of bi'sa, which is praising their rewards. وَحَسُنَتْ مُرْتَفَقًا. حَسُنَتْ مُرْتَفَقًا. What an excellent and good is the resting place. Comparing that to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the disbelievers. وَسَاءَتْ مُرْتَفَقًا. What a worst resting place for the disbelievers, which is in the hellfire. The people of belief and righteous good deeds, حسنت مرتفقة, the best resting place, and it's an everlasting one. This is how this life is all about. This is the end of things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the believers the ability to understand that and to act based on the end of things, not based on the immediate moment that we're in. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, after mentioning what the disbelievers they are doing to him and so on, he says, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ تَخْتَصِمُونَ. That you will die, O Prophet of Allah, and they will die. And then with your Lord, in the day of judgment, you will have your judgment with your disputes and your quarrelsomes. The matter is much nearer than anyone can think. So why being so much clinging to this miserable life that we live in, meaning sadness and depressions and concerns and all of that, living this beautiful life of this worldly life, it's a beautiful one. But when the hearts are attached to the hereafter, when the hearts are attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their concern is the good deeds. When we fill this life of ours with good deeds, deeds of obedience to Allah, worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the proper belief, the matters of ibadah to Allah, the dua, the Qur'an, the recitation, the ibadah, and to be away from the haram, and to do the permissible things, seek provisions from Allah, wealth, work, but halal ways, relationships, and so on. This is how beautiful the life is, so that a person would receive the best of endings of things. So after that, and how that leads, and it's in between the previous story of the people of the cave and how they protected their religion and taken the means to do so, and leading the way to the next story that is mentioned, or the example that is mentioned, the man of having two gardens. So this is now the power of wealth, the power that people might have in this life, and how that this is a test from Allah. Some people they win, and some people they fail miserably when they use it in an evil way. So this is where the next verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الرَّجُلَيْنِ جعلنا لأحدهما جنتين من أعناب وحففناهما بنخل وجعلنا بينهما زرعا. And present to them an example of two men. We granted to one of them two gardens of grapevines, and we bordered them with palm trees and placed between them fields of crops. So now this is describing the garden and also the next verse. So وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا, وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا, give them, present to them an example. الضرب, ضرب, this word ضرب means strike, physically, right? But here when it comes to the methal, when it comes to the examples, it's refers to ذكره وصفه, as they say, the description or mentioning the example and its description. So when there's a parable is mentioned, example, and the parable or the example is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Qur'an, and this is the best examples are mentioned in the Qur'an. Nothing more eloquent, more beautiful, perfect in how the examples are than the book of Allah, than the Qur'an. Why? Because the Qur'an, the speech of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the heavens and the earth and everything. So He gives the best examples. And the importance of the examples in such a way that you have an example that you're supposed to relate or to make analogy with your present life or your present state or your situation, with your circumstances. And the best example is when they're exactly the same, exactly with every details, not in just in general terms. So every single aspect and element in it is exactly the same, and it shows the exact circumstances that you have so that you can clearly relate yourself to it, so that it becomes easy for a person to say, yes, this is what I need to do. And you have it with a practical example, different than just having instructions, do this and not to do that. But now you have an example that fits perfectly what you're about to or what you need to implement in your life with regards to the wealth. Everybody loves to have wealth. And some people they have it, some people they don't have it. So now the verse describes the case of someone, two men, one of them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that's why وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا, but reflect upon وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا, that present to them a methal, that you would have the description of it for you to follow, not just to say, wow, this is such a great example, but you have to follow that example. Two men, رجلين, جعلنا لأحدهما جنتين. We made for one of them لأحدهما, that's in the dual tense, جنتين, two gardens for one. So one has two gardens. That's جنتين, one is Jannah. من أعناب, from grapevines. Grapevines, that's the أعناب. وحففناهما بنخل. And actually this is one of the ways to describe the best gardens whatsoever. People even benefit from there physically when it comes to constructing or designing their gardens. So it has grapevines and is surrounded وحففناهما بنخل, surrounded by palm trees. وجعلنا بينهما زرعا, and we made between or placed between them fields of crops, all benefiting things, grapes, palm trees, crops in between. All of that is part of the description of the gardens. The next verse says, كلتا الجنتين آتت أكلها ولم تظلم منه شيئا وفجرنا خلالهما نهرا. Each of the two gardens produced its fruit and did not fall short thereof in anything, and we caused to gush forth within them a river. So here's the example: perfect circumstances whatsoever, perfect gardens. كلتا الجنتين, both gardens. آتت أكلها. آتت أكلها. الإتيان is to get, is for something to come. So أكلها is basically the produce. So the produce of the two gardens where it gives it fully. كلتا الجنتين آتت أكلها. Its fruits, its produce, it's given perfectly. ولم تظلم منه شيئا. And it's never given less than what's perfect. You know, when someone has a garden, has a field, has crops, you know, they don't usually get it 100%. With every single grain in it, you know, they produce it. You would find if they get it 90%, over 90%, this is great. But for something like this that doesn't lose anything, 100% of everything that is planted, the produce of it is perfect. آتت أكلها ولم تظلم, did not decrease anything of it whatsoever. And more than that, وفجرنا خلالهما نهرا. And in between, within these two gardens, there are river. There's a river that they can basically get the irrigation from it with ease, with no difficulty whatsoever. So this is an example of a perfect circumstances for someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him, a form of wealth that is blessed and has all means of goodness in it whatsoever. More after that, still with the garden, and then what is the affair of that individual? Was he grateful to Allah? Now this is the test. He's given something with that ease. How did he react? And that's what matters. It's not about how a person is given or who's given. He's given for a reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise for people to be tested. So we'll see that inshallah ta'ala after the break. So stay with us inshallah.
محمد رسول الله محمد رسول الله.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Welcome back, and with the verses in Surah Al-Kahf that talks about the two men. One, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave two gardens, perfect gardens as the details of the verses, and go back and see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected it, and the details that are mentioned there is for people to get the example. It's not about the gardens necessarily, meaning then a person would say, where was the gardens? What kind of crops that the gardens were having, except that what's mentioned, grapes and grapevines and palm trees and so on. But to basically to remember that this is a perfect garden with perfect circumstances, that a person is given a perfect form of wealth. Then after what we heard, the next verse, which is verse number 34, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَانَ لَهُ ثَمَرٌ فَقَالَ لِصَاحِبِهِ وَهُوَ يُحَاوِرُهُ أَنَا أَكْثَرُ مِنْكَ مَالًا وَأَعَزُّ نَفَرًا. And he had fruit. So he said to his companion while he was conversing with him, I'm greater than you in wealth and mightier in numbers of men. So the first words of this verse is the continuation of what has been mentioned in the previous verses about the description of the Jannah, of the garden. the two gardens. He says, وَكَانَ لَهُ ثَمَرٌ, and he had fruit. So the fruit is given in full, the produce is given in full, perfect garden by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So instead of being grateful to Allah, he said something to his companion, which is the other man that is mentioned in this example. فَقَالَ لِصَاحِبِهِ, so this is the owner of the garden. What would you get from his statement? وَهُوَ يُحَاوِرُهُ, while they were conversing. So it gives us the image, they were standing one next to the other, their companions, neighbors, living together, whatever. So he's talking to his companion saying, أَنَا أَكْثَرُ مِنْكَ مَالًا وَأَعَزُّ نَفَرًا. Ana, he's saying, I, myself, I'm greater than you. أكثر منك مالا, I have more wealth than you. وأعز نفرا, and mightier. أعز from al-izza, from might and power. نفرا, a number of men. I have more men, more maybe men in his family, more men to help him. Manpower, he has manpower and he has wealth. The combination of both. He has lots of money and he has lots of manpower to help him to establish his wealth in the most perfect way. The statement in itself shows that that person is not humble. And this is something that we would understand when we read the Qur'an. Person would say, never read the Qur'an before, he would say, what's wrong with that? The guy is being honest. He said, I have more wealth than you, I have more power than you, manpower than you, and that's what the nafar means. Many people, they would talk like this. And of course, yes, it might seem the way that they would say it in an arrogant way, or what was the conversation is about, things like this. But the way of the Qur'an is when the believers, they say something, if it's a matter of goodness, they attribute it to Allah. They would say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed this matter upon me. And that's why it shows also in the rest of the conversation between both of them, and how that the believers, they would say, this is by the will of Allah, this is by the mercy of Allah, Allah bestowed this upon me. Like, and we taught before that, even when you talk about something in the future, you say insha'Allah, everything is attributed to Allah. So this is what he said, and he was so arrogantly talking about his, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him. But then after that, the next verse, it says, وَدَخَلَ جَنَّتَهُ وَهُوَ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ قَالَ مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. And he entered his garden while he was unjust to himself. He said, I do not think that this will perish ever. This is how ignorant a human being can reach as a result of forgetfulness of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the wealth or the power that they're given make them blind of the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it says here, describing his affair, وَدَخَلَ جَنَّتَهُ, he entered his Jannah, his garden, this beautiful garden that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him. He entered while he is in that state of dhulm. وَهُوَ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. While he's entering the Jannah, while he's entering his garden, he's been in that state of wronging himself. He's been arrogant. He's arrogantly entering his garden. And he would say, as a result of that, مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. I don't think that this would never perish. It would never be destroyed. For whatever reason, it's well established. He worked hard on it. Why would he think that this will change? He has the manpower. He has the wealth to keep it going. And the land is fertile. He has rivers. Nothing will change. Will continue to be. This is the arrogance of the human being. Not just for the gardens. People can say this with any wealth or something that Allah bestowed upon them. Someone is having lots of wealth. People would say, this man would never be bankrupted whatsoever. With the billions and billions of dollars that he has, for example, if he just quit work and he just every day he spent $1 million a day, he would never be poor for the next 80 years or 100 years. No, who lives that long? They think their status would never change. And this by itself, that statement, it shows that the person is ignorant about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And that's why he says, مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. He thought that this would never perish, would never change whatsoever. As you see, the Qur'an gives us the example perfectly. Regardless what's the name of this person, what place that he was in, all these things is not mentioned because there's no significance to it. But what he's saying and what's being described here to give us the example perfectly, so that no one would come. Sometimes people, when they're ungrateful to Allah, when they don't have anything anyway to start with, when someone acting arrogantly when he doesn't have anything. He's not like the richest man on the face of earth, and he's acting arrogantly. He doesn't have anything. That's why even the Prophet ﷺ, he said about the worst people that will be having or receiving one of the worst punishments in the Day of Judgment, those who would act in a way that the means and his life was not helping them to act this way. You know, for example, that he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, "Ma'il mustakbir." Someone is poor and he's arrogant. You know, usually the ones that are rich are being arrogant, which is still wrong for them. But for someone to be poor and to act arrogantly, that's even have no excuse whatsoever to act in an arrogant way. So it shows that there are levels in this. So the example here is mentioned, he had the means. He had the means, and usually when people are not paying attention and with the lack of al-iman, if they have the means that this person had, they would have these words of arrogance. And they would say that they are this and that, and they have might and power. This would never perish. They will continue to be the richest and the most powerful. And then it led them to disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the next verse. He says, وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ قَائِمَةً وَلَئِن رُدِدتُّ إِلَى رَبِّي لَأَجِدَنَّ خَيْرًا مِنْهَا مُنْقَلَبًا. And I do not think that the hour will occur, and even if I should be brought back to my Lord, I will surely find better than this as a return. وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ. He disbelieved in Allah. He says, and I don't think that the hour will be established, will occur. What is the relationship between this and disbelieving in the hour? This is how the forgetfulness leads the person. So that's usually, you would find that there is some relationship here, even though intellectually there's no relationship. But the worldly matters can easily divert the person away. So he disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He sees that he can irrigate his land, he can do things, he sees the cause and effect, he sees how things are happening. And he said that it's never going to perish, it's never going to be destroyed, and there's no hour. And if, as he said, if there was a day of resurrection, I would find better than what I have now. He took as an evidence, since he's given in this life, right? And some people, they have their faith on the edge like this, right? They don't believe, but they say, if there is something, since we have it as a good way in this life, we'll have it in the hereafter. We'll have it also in the hereafter. So basically what the verse says about the like of these people, أَتَّخَذْتُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَهْدًا أَمْ تَقُولُونَ عَلَى مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Did you take a covenant between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you're saying about Allah that you don't know? Which is of course the second one. They did not receive a covenant from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give them a covenant that you would be receiving what is best than that, better than that in the hereafter, but rather they're saying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge, just saying things. And it's one of the strange things that people, oftentimes they would say the like of this. They take an evidence of what they have in this life, if they are having all means of goodness, that this will continue to be for them in the hereafter. Based on what? Based on the fact that just their actions? No, it's just something that they saw, so this is what's going to happen to them, without any evidence whatsoever. So this is all part of the arrogance, dictating upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what they receive. And that's why he says, وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ قَائِمَةً. He disbelieved in the hour, وَلَئِن رُدِدتُّ. And what if I would ever to be brought back, رُدِدتُّ, return back to my Lord, إِلَى رَبِّي لَأَجِدَنَّ خَيْرًا. I would definitely, he's certain, I would find definitely خَيْرًا مِنْهَا مُنْقَلَبًا, the best and better for me than this as a return, when he returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you see, these statements are full of ignorance and arrogance and no basis to it whatsoever. All of that is because the fact that he was given wealth and power. And the Qur'an makes us think. Right? So again, one of the benefits that we take from this before the story is continued is that having wealth or power has nothing to do with being upon the truth or not. It sounds very straightforward, but many people, they don't get these things together. They think, or they act basically sometimes. If someone has power and wealth, that means he's right. He's always right, because he was right in making lots of money. They think that he was very smart to make lots of money. He's very smart to have so much power. So that means he knows what he's doing. That means he's correct. This has nothing to do with that. You know, many people, they have so much wealth, but they're not really smart. or it's not because of how clever they are. This is all by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has nothing to do with the truth. The truth is something else. So not to be deceived. And instead Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the believers to humble themselves. And a person can enjoy the same thing. And as the verses will continue inshallah ta'ala, but as you see that a person can receive the same thing. A person can have lots of wealth, lots of power, but humble yourself to your Lord. Be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fulfill the rights of the poor, for example, by giving a small portion of it. Be obedient to Allah. Establish your prayer. Be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why being arrogant and being forgetful and being rebellious against the commands of Allah? And a person think that this is, as a result of his power and might. This is not the case. This has nothing to do with it. And this doesn't make sense to start with. Then after that, his friend would reply to him, and it's going to show that the friend of his is someone that is righteous. And that's why this evil one versus the good one. So the good one now will reply back in this conversation. And we are taught in this conversation who's the arrogant so that we can avoid it, and who's the grateful, who's the good person, so that we can follow his words as an example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets in the Qur'an, in the Surah Al-Kahf. But because of the time, we'll stop here inshaAllah ta'ala, and we'll continue the story. So we'll continue from where we stopped here inshaAllah, without repeating the whole verses, the set of verses again. So hopefully inshaAllah ta'ala we can do that next time by the will of Allah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا وبينوا فأولئك أتوب عليهم وأنا التواب الرحيم.
فادعوا الله مخلصين له الدين ولو كره الكافرون.
يا زكريا إنا نبشرك بغلام